Squishies! Welcome back to another vlog. This is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is a little different from what I normally do. And honestly, I normally would have rejected this vlog commission and asked them to pick something else, because I normally vlog either movies or episodes of things, stuff that's relatively self-contained. But this was a request from Benny Blue, who backed me for a long time. This is his last commission request, and he's family. So between all of that, I decided, all right, this time I'll do it. So what he asked was that I play for an amount of time equivalent to watching something for a vlog. Wherever I was in the game, play from there, and for that amount of time, and then talk about basically whatever I wanted to talk about it. So as it turns out, the timing worked out really well, because this was the play session where I got farther than I did on my first attempt to play through the game. I don't have a lot of time to play video games that aren't for Let's Plays. Honestly, I don't even have a lot of time to play those, which is why I only get out 1 or 2 a month. So I really, it's really hard for me to get through a lengthy game like this. So I attempted to play it like over a year ago. Sounds about right. It was about a year ago, and did not get all that far. So I picked it back up again in August and played it a couple times, and got more or less back to where I was, and then didn't have any chance to play it all month until now when I'm doing this vlog. So basically that means, as a result of all that, I'm playing the first chunk of game that I have not seen before. What that chunk essentially is I just left Kakariko Village when I started this play session, and I went to Hateno Village, and then went back to Kakariko Village. Along the way, I passed a couple shrines, but I decided to focus on story a little more for this. So I didn't go looking for the shrines that I was detecting. I will probably go back and look for them at some point, because I like the shrines a lot. So what do I want to talk about in regards to this game? So I've been playing Zelda games a long time. Although I had a NES, I did not play NES Zelda. My first Zelda game was Link to the Past, and I loved it. It was one of my favorite Super Nintendo games. I never actually owned it, but I adored that game and played it at every opportunity. And it remains probably my favorite of the series, though Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess, in very different ways, are both really, really good, and also contenders for my favorite in the series. Although I haven't finished Breath of the Wild, so it's very plausible that its position will change as it goes on. It wouldn't be the first time that happened. Wind Waker's position in my list has changed many, many, many times over the course of the years and over the course of my playing it. So I'm pretty steeped in the Zeldas. It is probably the Nintendo franchise where I am most steeped in the lore, as the kids probably don't say. I've got a copy of Hyrule Historia around here somewhere. I have read all of it. The timeline in it is wrong, and I could go into great length about why, but I won't. But what really strikes me about this game is that, so, a lot of Zelda games, you are fighting against a threat to the kingdom. Twilight Princess, for example, Link to the Past. Sometimes that threat is already ascendant, but the kingdom itself is there, it's just been overrun. There's a disaster that is ongoing that you are fighting to restore things. Some Zelda games put you in newly arrived in a new place that has similar stuff going on. But there's in Majora's Mask, there's impending doom coming, but you're fighting it off. But there's a couple Zelda games, most notably the original, which I did go back and play eventually, though I actually never beat it. But the original Legend of Zelda and now Breath of the Wild, very notably, are in a very different kind of setting. It's a setting where you are ostensibly in the land of Hyrule, and yet it's a wilderness. And there are monsters everywhere, and I mean, that's true of most of the Zelda games, but there's something subtly different about the original and about this, where it doesn't feel like you're in a country. It feels like you're in a wilderness. And when you come upon a town, it's almost a little jarring how domestic and safe Kakariko and Hateno feel, because the rest of the world that I've seen so far is wilderness, to the point of, like, the whole Great Plateau is nothing but ruins, but there's just random ruins just wandering around. You come across places that were once intact but are now ruins. This is a post-apocalyptic setting. Evil won 1,000 years ago. The kingdom isn't just in being invaded, it's been invaded. It's been overrun. It has been not just conquered, but destroyed. And that, to me, is really interesting, because it's not a desolate wasteland. It's lush and full of life, and there are forests and animals and a whole ecology, and it's just not a human world anymore, or Hylian, or whatever. And that is really fascinating, because there's a paper that my friend Catherine Hemon wrote, where she talked about the Zelda series and the curse of demise that was introduced in Skyward Sword, that this, recurring force of hatred would seek to destroy the legacy of the hero and the royal family of Hyrule. And the point she makes is that it actually functions as a force of renewal. That the royal family represents a state, imposes a state of stasis. Hyrule goes on for millennia while still being this, medieval fantasy kingdom. It doesn't really change from that. Even with, all the little bits of technology that are lying around, like the Guardians and the forge, or whatever it is, furnace that I had to light as part of the Hateno quest, which, by the way, was a great puzzle. I saw the solution pretty much right away, but it was still a neat concept, lighting the torch and then having to light the lanterns along the way and put the torch out so it doesn't burn away and keep going. It was a good puzzle. and I enjoyed it. And I only started like 2 or 3 brush fires in the process of doing it. So yay me. And I only set myself on fire once, so woo! I don't know if I did not mention this, but while I have played a lot of Zelda games, I have beaten most of them. I have not beaten the original or Zelda 2. I've never actually played Link's Awakening or what's it called? Link Between Worlds. I have played and beaten the entire rest of the series. But I'm actually really bad at them. I kind of have to brute force my way through them, dying a lot. Like, a lot. And I die a lot in this one too. I am very bad at it. But it's fun. Anyway, point is I only set myself on fire once, which for me is an achievement. But, I mean, despite that, there's still every indicator that even at its height before it was destroyed, Hyrule was still this medieval fantasy kingdom with a princess and knights and all this stuff. Like, it's static. And then Ganon comes along, the Curse of Demise strikes. And one of the things Hammond noted is that the malice in Breath of the Wild that is powering the monsters is actually, in the Japanese, they use the same word as they use for Demise's curse. It was translated differently in the English, but in the Japanese it's the same thing. That's actually a force of renewal. It forces change. It breaks the hold of the royal family. And that actually fits with, if you go back to Ocarina of Time and the creation myth, that actually fits with the roles of the different goddesses that, it was Furore that brought life. But what Nehru brought was law. Nehru brought the rules. Nehru took all the infinite possibilities created by the other gods and set them. Whereas Din actually created the world. Din made the earth itself. So you get a cycle between them. Like, Din comes in with fire, but also is that which creates. Din makes the world anew in the form of the bearer of the Triforce of Power, Ganon. Then life arises and takes over in the form of, that's Furore's power, and it's in the form of the bearer of the Triforce of Courage, the hero, Link. And then, after a time, law is imposed and freezes everything in the form of the bearer of the Triforce of Wisdom, Nehru's representative, the royal family, and especially Zelda. And that's very clearly something that's going on here. The Sheikah technology that was supposed to hold Ganon at bay is all lit up with blue light and blue fire, like the furnace I had to relight in this session. The stasis that Link was placed in to heal was all blue light as well. So are the shrines where ancient Sheikah stuff is preserved, stasis. And the people who are connected with it that I've encountered so far, Impa and I'm blanking on the scientist's name. I literally just met her in Hateno Village. Something beginning with P. They are immortal. unchanging. She's permanently a child. I couldn't find the upstairs she was talking about, where her diary was being kept. Like, I found a room, like a bedroom, that was above the lab, but I couldn't find any diary in it. So I don't know what's up with that. So I don't know exactly what's going on with her, but she does seem to have been locked in the form of a child. You know, that's whereas Impa ages, clearly, she's very, very old, but she's still sort of frozen. That's, you know, kind of the stasis thing that's going on. And it's just, that's a really interesting thing to me to explore thematically, that these cycles that Hyrule goes through of creation, growth, stasis, destruction, creation, over and over again, are really interesting to me, and they make sense of Ganon being chosen by one of the gods. It makes sense that power would be given to the person destined to destroy and thus break the stasis and make room for new growth. And so what that means is that, like the original game, Breath of the Wild is set in a period when neither power nor wisdom is in ascendance, where it's neither Ganon dominated or royal family dominated. This is the time of the hero. This is life ascendant. And this is a time of courage. And these are the two games that most emphasize exploration in the whole series. And I love the exploration element of Breath of the Wild. Honestly, my first attempt at the game, and if I'm going to be honest, most of this attempt at the game, except for this more focused session, has been just wandering around, seeing what I find, trying to, you know, locate interesting things and then locate interesting things on the horizon and then figure out how to get to them. And that in itself is a tremendously fun game. So, yeah. This is a good chunk of a good game, and I think that's all there really is to be said about it. A good chunk of a good game from a good series. I think that's about it. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my Patreon for early access to vlogs, essays, let's plays, and more. And I'll see you all next time. Bye!